Alright, now that we have our service connections, it's time to jump into the repository setup and what will be the structure of them. In order to manage repositories in Azure DevOps, you would need to go to your project and to the repos blade, repos path, and by default it is empty. Now let's take a moment actually and speak a little bit about how it is possible to set up repositories and what are the repository structure options. And as I can see it, there are actually two options available. The first one is to have one big repository at least per project or per your application or service. And in that repository you would keep both of your infrastructure code and your application code. And I would assume that we will follow the nice pattern of having infrastructure as code and manage everything using the same Azure DevOps project. This approach, it is perfectly valid and you can do it. You would need to have multiple Azure DevOps pipelines for this one repository, but it is possible to set them up using triggers and point them to specific parts of your application. But still, I don't really like it because it will, in my opinion, it will add some sort of extra complexity that you would need to keep in mind that when you work on this part of the repository in this folder, then you are touching the infrastructure code, and in other places it would be for your application code, and maybe there would be some other folders, and based on just what language do you use, it can be quite complicated to add extra layers of folder structure at the very least to navigate to all of the correct places. And yeah, as I said, I personally don't really like it, and instead my preference is actually to keep infrastructure code in a separate repository and application code in another repository. So in my opinion, once again, it's a little bit easier to manage. What it wouldn't give us, at least right now, is the ability to have a full CI/CD process where if you need to deploy all of the services into a new environment, for example, then everything can be done with a single click. Instead, you would need to manage multiple pipelines, or you would need to create a pipeline that would manage multiple pipelines. But still, that's my preference. With that being said, I will show how to use this approach, and we will do that option. So in order to create a new repository, it's actually pretty simple. By default, when you open the repos, as you can see, you already have actually a single repo that will be called exactly the same as your project. So in my case, it is pizza selector, and we have a repository called pizza selector. It's the only one. I don't really like that name, and instead let's create two new repositories of different names. So one of them would be pizza UI for front-end code, and you can add by default a README file, which will be empty or pre-generated one, and you can add a git ignore with specified type. But I'm not going to select this one, and the README will not be there because I have my code prepared and I just want to edit a new. The repository type, it will be of Git. You can also have this TFVC, but we are going to stick to Git. So let's create first repository like this, and at the same time, almost immediately, we will create a second repository that will be pizza infra, as I said, for our infrastructure code. Once again, I'm not going to add the README or the git ignore because I have them prepared. After we created those two projects, you can clone them and use your preferred way to work with Git. For me, I prefer to use Visual Studio Code, And in this example, we will do exactly this. So we'll copy the URL of this repository, and we are going to use the simplest HTTPS type of a connectivity to it. Go to Visual Studio Code, and then over here, under the source control, I will add a new remote for this repository. So I will pass the URL that we copied. I will call it pizza UI remote. And then if it is a new source control for you, it will try to log you in using that Git credential manager and using Microsoft account. But instead of doing this one, just for this test, I will close this one and go back to this repository, and I will click the generate Git credentials. That will basically allow me to use the username of pizza selector and this randomly generated password. As it is said in this notification, this password will be visible only now, and if I refresh the page, then the password will be gone, but it would be possible to regenerate those credentials anytime you want. Now, with this password copied, if I go back here after I close the window, it is still asking me to get the password, so I can paste the password, and now everything that I need to do is to push those changes to the newly added remote. And once again, in order to do that, I can push or pull, and I will push to my pizza UI remote. After that is done, and that will be pretty quick, when we go back to the Azure DevOps and refresh this page, we will see all of the changes for the file, and what is very nice, and actually it works the same for pretty much everything, you would have the README file displayed over here. Now I will repeat that same exercise with the infrastructure code, and the good thing is that actually those credentials that we generated before, they still work for this repository as well. So I will copy now this URL, go back to Visual Studio Code, change it into my infrastructure code, and go to the source control, add it as a new remote, and now we will call it pizza infra origin. And as you can see here, now it doesn't ask about the credentials, so it is using the previous one, and we can push it to this origin. Now with that done, we can check that the remote repository has content over here, and we will jump into the pipelines. But before we do that, I just wanted to show a couple more things. Once again, as I said before, that it is possible to regenerate the Git credentials anytime you want, and they will be still available. In order to do that, you would need to click on this clone button, and you can generate credentials again. And another thing, that if you would want to forget the password from your machine, you can go to, at least for Windows, you can go to the Credential Manager application, and there you would be able to go to Windows credentials, and here for the Git pizza selector, you can expand it and then remove those credentials. In that case, Git will ask you again how I'm going to log into this particular repository. Okay, with that, let's jump into the pipelines.